Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Saturday Shoutouts on the Thrive Tribe. Super excited about my guest today. I have not seen him in a very long time in person, although I see him on Facebook. So please welcome, I'm going to let him introduce himself. Welcome, Darryl Evey. Welcome, Darryl.
Hey,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
being here.
Thank you.
So Darryl, why don't you share with our Thrive Tribe how we met a long time ago?
So you used to be the assistant principal, I think it was, at Lucerne Valley Junior High School. And my memory might not be right because that was like 20 years ago.
I was a teacher.
Oh, you're a teacher, okay. And you used to put on these really cool events at the school where they would do leadership training and they give away food and they still do a lot of that stuff too, which is kind of cool to see. But my Rotary Club was invited to be a part of it, and I came out and I was like, wow, this is awesome. And so I started volunteering and got involved. And then like 15 years later, when Facebook was invented, we found each other again.
Yeah, we did Synergy Days, and then I'm trying to think, we did Youth to Youth event, I think is what you...
That's the one, Youth to Youth.
Yes. Yeah, that you volunteered at. That was fun. I just had a flashback of that whole... So tell us a little bit about yourself, Darryl. We can see that you live in Wrightwood because that's popping up under your name. So you see...
Oh, it's set up for that because I do a lot of video conferencing across, and so it pops up automatically. I have that set in there because when we're doing a video conference call, it's around the world. It's helpful to know where people are because it just the time zones and all of that.
So. Yeah, no, that's cool.
But yeah, I work for a nonprofit. I love my job. I absolutely love what I do. My off time, about me personally, I love my Harleys. I have 2 Harleys now because I can't afford 3. But since they're both almost paid off, one of them has been paid off for like 20 years. But so I'm looking at buying another Harley probably within the next month, so I'm really excited about. But I love going on rides. I love riding to and from work. And part of that is a mindfulness thing for me because when I'm in the car, I'm listening to NPR and I'm getting angry. But if I'm on my motorcycle, I'm smelling the wind and I'm feeling bits of hot and cold, which you don't notice when you're in a car. And I'm seeing the other cars around me and I'm seeing the plants on the side of the road. And that's very grounding for me, and it helps me forget about whatever it was at work I was working on or whatever was going on. So I find it very helpful. The other thing I love to do is running. I love running marathons. I used to do several a year, but I've gotten old and fat and lazy. So I typically only I run the LA Marathon. I've been running that almost every year for 10 or 15 years now. And I still run that every year. And I try to hit Long Beach once in a while. And each year I try to throw in an extra one somewhere that I don't know about because it forces me to exercise. And without some kind of it's like, oh my God, I'm running a marathon in 2 months. I need to get out of bed and go for a run. I mean, that's what forces me to run. And then after I run, I tell myself, why did I need to push myself to do this? I love doing it. I just love doing it when it's over.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then you can appreciate it.
Right, exactly. The first 15 to 20 minutes hurts. But once I get in for an hour or two, it's just like it goes into neutral and it feels great.
That's because those endorphins are kicking in and it feels good.
Right.
So tell us, you mentioned you work for a nonprofit. Tell us about the organization you work for.
So Family Assistance Program, we serve all of San Bernardino County. Our corporate office is in Victorville, which is the high desert area. We have a range of programs. We started in 1996. I wasn't the founder, but, 1986 is when it started. And it was a domestic violence program. And as time has gone on, the needs of victims of domestic violence have changed. And also we've identified more gaps. So for example, when I was involved with Youth to Youth, part of it was we have a healthy relationship classes where we go into high schools and teach kids about healthy relationships. And we started finding that there were kids that had moved out and moved in with their boyfriend, and then their boyfriend became a jerk, and then they didn't know where to go. And they couldn't come to a domestic violence shelter because we're only allowed to accept adults. So we opened a youth shelter because there was no youth shelter in San Bernardino County. We were like the only county in Southern California that didn't have one. So we opened the youth shelter, and that's worked out really well, and it's been fun. Then we opened a program for prisoner reentry program because we learned, one of the things that I've learned is that Every woman that I have talked to who has been in prison or jail is there because some guy convinced them to do something stupid or to take the rap for something stupid that he did. And many of these women that we've worked with, when they get out of prison, they have nowhere to go except back to that same jerk that caused all the problems in the first place. So we created a program to help them get out. And I'm really proud that our success rate is over 80% of the women who come into our program. Within 12 months, they are self-sufficient, they have a full-time job, and they're moving into their own apartment that they're paying for. And that's exciting. I'm really, really proud of that program. And then we opened a human trafficking program because we found that victims of domestic violence, sometimes their abuser was also their pimp, and it's intimate partner violence. And there's a lot of controversy within the domestic violence field as to whether or not human trafficking victims qualify or not. And I believe they do, so we started a program for them. So we currently we now operate 3 emergency shelters, about 20 transitional housing units. We have a couple of drop-in centers, a community center, and we're in the process of opening another community center in San Bernardino. So I love my job because I'm the director, which means I get to go find problems and find solutions and then build a program for the solution and then step back and let the amazing people that I hire to actually run the programs. And I stay completely hands off with how to run programs. I allow the people who are doing the work to make the decisions.
Wow. There's so many questions I have popping up sharing that. So I think I want to start with domestic violence because that's where it sort of started. Right. How have you seen since, and I know you didn't start in 1986 necessarily with family assistance, but from the time that you started, how have you seen how domestic violence is approached by organizations such as yourself to how it is approached now? How has it shifted? Is it the same? How is that?
The needs of victims have changed, for one thing. In 1986, I think the statistics were like 70% of women were stay-at-home housewives or help moms or something. Today, we're finding more women are the breadwinner in their family, and they don't rely on a husband or a boyfriend to take care of them as much. There's still some of that, but not to the same degree. We're also finding men coming in, and part of that is the legislation. We worked on legislation to make sure that victims are treated fairly. Then there became a question about who's the victim. So then, you have 2 people that get into a fight, and they happen, just if 2 people, just random people get into a fight, the police show up and they handle it. But when 2 people who are intimate partners get into a fight, the police show up and they're required to arrest someone. And in the old days, they always arrested the woman or the man. And now the law legislation has changed, and they have to arrest the dominant aggressor. And that's complicated. It's a very complicated issue, and I think it's kind of it's hard for law enforcement. They can't make that decision, honestly. I mean, they do the best they can, and I respect that. But you can't, in just an hour of watching 2 angry people talk, to see which one is the dominant one. I mean, the woman has a bruise on her arm where he had grabbed her and has bruised her, and he has a slice on the top of his head where she hit him with the frying pan. So the dominant aggressor in that circumstance is hit her because he's bleeding and she's not. Therefore, what she's done is worse. But it doesn't take into the fact that he was going to strangle her and she was going to die if she hadn't hit him with that frying pan. On the other hand, you do have the ones that go the other way, where the woman is the dominant aggressor, where she's the one that's being aggressive. And one of the things that I've noticed over the years, we started accepting men in our shelter a few years ago. And the state of California has dictated that all domestic violence shelters are required to appropriately serve men. And I'm really glad. I'm proud of that. I think it's great because they need to be treated as well. We're working on some legislation to require all domestic violence shelters to accept pets. We were the first animal-friendly domestic violence shelter in the nation. And if you go to the American Humane Society's website, there's a program called Pets and Women's Shelters. And there's a whole write-up about our program with pictures and the whole 9 yards, because we were the first place. We put in pet doors and a kennel outside our dog run on the side of the building. And our whole property is double fenced. So the pets can come in and sleep with their family just like they would at home. And then they can go outside and go to the bathroom when they need to. And if they are the kind that run off, then we have this nice fenced in dog run for them to go into. And if they're the kind that just like to chill, they have we can open that fence and they've got the whole yard to chill to. So it's worked out really well. We've been doing it for 8 years. We have not had a single problem. I've talked to 20 or 30 domestic violence programs across the nation, and every one of them who have started doing this has not had a problem. The kind of people that are that concerned about their pets are the kind of people who take really good care of their pets, and the pets are always really well behaved.
Well, and I would think that, just because pets have been shown to be such resiliency boosters
Right.
for medical and emotional health, that
Right.
even if it wasn't for the other people in the shelter who don't have pets, that would be kind of a benefit,
Right.
just to be around animals. Would you say, and I know that the legislation's changed, and you talked about men now, them having to serve men in domestic violence shelters. Would you say there's still a lot of reluctant men to come forward about
Yes.
violence?
The majority of the men that we serve come to us looking for a restraining order or protective orders, something along those lines, because they just want that crazy person away from them, and they're afraid. There aren't as many men that come to us seeking shelter because most of the time they don't need it. I mean, they have a place to stay. Most men do not have custody of their children. That's the one anomaly that the majority of the men that come to us for help do have custody of their children, and that's part of why they need the help. And they tell us that straight out. They're like, "Yeah, I go sleep on my friend's couch or sleep in the car, but I can't make my children do that." So that's why they come to us for help.
Wow. Um, Tell me a little bit about, well, not a little, I'd like to know a lot, actually, because I think that this topic is really important, and I think educators have more exposure to this topic, and we have a lot of educators in the Thrive Tribe, but we have a lot of non-educators, and that's human trafficking.
Yes.
I think sometimes people think of human trafficking as something that happens somewhere else, and so how can you kind of share with the audience, what is human trafficking, and how is it really in our backyard when we don't know it?
So human trafficking, by definition, is when someone is manipulated through force, fraud, or coercion. Those are the three. One of those three things has to be involved. The most common one we see is the fraud and coercion. Fraud being absolutely number one. I think that I can honestly say that every high school in America has human trafficking happening in that school. And maybe in low income schools there's more of it going on, but when you get into an area that's more affluent, it's still happening. And it's sad that so many educators don't get it. We're working on legislation on that one too. I think it passed the Assembly, and it's like flying through the Senate now. So it'll probably go into effect in the 1920 school year, that every school in California will be required to teach human trafficking to their staff so that they can identify and understand it, but also teach human trafficking to the kids. The kids need to know about it because so many girls, and I say girls because that's more commonly what it is, but men as well, boys as well. But what it looks like frequently is a girl does not have a warm relationship with her parents, and she doesn't have a close relationship with any caring adults. And she finds some guy online, or she finds some guy out somewhere where she hangs out, and it's an older man. Online, they usually lie about their age quite a bit. But usually what it is it's an older man who has a couple of dollars in his pocket, and he treats her nice, and he treats her with respect, and he listens to her. And I can't count them. I've been to a lot of marriage therapists during my divorces. And the one thing that comes up repeatedly is that women need to feel heard. And teenage girls especially need to feel heard. And they feel like they're not heard. And a guy who wants to manipulate a girl, that's what they do. They make them feel heard. So educators and parents can look at the child, and if they don't have a caring, loving adult in their life, then they're at risk. And if you see their personality changing, then there's probably something bad going on. And there needs to be more of that. So any of the people in your Thrive Tribe that would like training on this, I have a group of staff members that are all survivor advocates. They can come in and they can talk about what it looks like in your neighborhood and in your field. They can talk about what it feels like for them. One of the staff that does a lot of these classes, she was recruited into the life when she was 14, And by the time she was 16, she was working the streets of San Bernardino. Today she's got her life back together and life is great. And she's just a wonderful, amazing, beautiful person, which always blows me away that these women, these girls that we work with, they've been subjected to incredible trauma, and they've been manipulated and abused and mistreated. Most of them have been raped multiple times, and they've had all this terrible stuff happen. And yet they're some of the nicest, sweetest people. And it always makes me wonder how can people be so bad to someone, and then for that person to not allow it change who they are in their core of who they are as a person. They're still that same wonderful, loving, caring person that they were when they were 14 before they went through hell. And that always amazes me. These girls are 1,000 times nicer than I am, and yet they have experienced much worse atrocities. So it really is impressive how resilient they are.
This is just such important work that you're doing, Darryl. How did you decide that you wanted to go into this line of work? How did that happen?
I used to own a couple of businesses, and I was engaged in the community. I was on the board for a couple of nonprofits, and I was doing some good stuff. And my friend was on the board for this agency, and they asked me to come in and help them shut the organization down because their finances were a wreck. They had $400,000 in income and $500,000 in expenses. And they said, we're not viable anymore. We need to shut the organization down. So I came in to look at it from a business perspective as to what will it take to wind down. And I realized that there wasn't a reason to shut it down. There was a reason to completely replace all of the management staff because all of them were utterly incompetent, including the executive director, who might be the worst executive director I'd ever seen. It was awful. And the board kind of really didn't know what they were doing either. So they had $400,000 worth of income. Why would you want to throw that away? So I helped them clean up their books, and my agreement was I would work for a month or two, and then my agreement was 6 months. And as that was going on, just towards when I was writing the job announcement for the executive director, we had this lady come into our office who had a black eye and a busted lip, and her arm was in a sling, and but she looked like she was dressed to go clubbing. And I thought, this is interesting. And then the staff members started kind of freaking out a little bit because she was brought to us. Law enforcement brought her to us, and she had come from the hospital. And eventually what we got out of her was that her boyfriend had beat her up, hogtied her, and told her that he was going to kill her and bury her. But then he had been drinking this whole time, so then he passed out. So while he was unconscious, she escaped. And we were able to help her, and we were able to help her get her life back together. We got a police officer that was willing to take the time to really talk to her and get all the information. They arrested him. While he was out on bail, he tried to kill her again. But this time we had done everything right. And there was a restraining order. So as soon as anything happened, the address popped up, restraining order popped up, law enforcement found him, and he was sentenced to 30 to life for what he had done to her. Wow. And I saw that, and I thought, I like working on cars because I owned an automotive business, and I also owned a biodiesel business, and I really liked trying to make the world a better place, the environment better by helping people understand biodiesel and start using it and stuff like that. And I like some of the other things I was doing, but none of those things made the world a better place to this degree. So I changed my focus. I decided that this is what I meant to do. This is what I need to do with my life.
And so how would you, yesterday I was just talking with a group about finding their purpose on the planet. How would you describe that idea of knowing your purpose, walking in purpose, discovering that aha, that this is my purpose? What would you say?
I have a friend from high school. When I was in high school, I was just friends with this guy, and he wanted to work in the utility department. He wanted to go to college and get a degree on water and how water works and plumbing and all that stuff. And then he wanted to work for a municipality establishing water. And he knew that when we were in like 11th grade. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. I figured out what I wanted to do with my life when I was 42, or maybe a little older than that even. So I think what's important is to keep your options open. do things that you like. Um, and what works for one person may not work for another. And your path is just that. It's your path. And if that path takes you through 100 rabbit trails that are dead ends, and just absorb and learn. I mean, everything that I did, I worked as a commercial real estate appraiser. And a commercial real estate appraisal is very similar to a federal grant as far as the way it's written and the skills that you need to write it. So I didn't know that at that time I was developing my grant writing skills, but I did. When I worked in the automotive field, I had mechanics that worked for me, and I had customers that I had to work with, and I developed skills that I use today from that. And I think it's just important for everybody to be the best, almost authentic person that you can possibly be right now in this moment, and not beat yourself up because you don't know where you're going to be in 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I think even the fact that you said it was your business experience that brought you in to look at, family assistance program in the first place, right? And
Right.
Being able to look at the books. And so all of that is valuable. Okay, let me ask you just some other random questions. So I was going to ask you purpose on your planet, but you already said that. So what is your favorite time of day?
I don't do favorites very well.
Do you have a lot of favorites?
I'm Buddhist, so I try to look at everything to be 100% present right now. And that means this moment is my favorite moment because it's the only one I have, and it's the only one I have any impact over. And so right now is what's important to me, what I'm doing in this moment. And my goal is for every moment to be my favorite moment.
I like it. I like that a lot. So let me ask you this. If you were to glean knowledge from 5 people on the planet, 5 people that you wanted to just pick their brain and maybe just learn a little bit about life, or learn a little bit about business, or learn a little bit about being a better human. And so you could invite these 5 people over for dinner. Who would be the 5 people whose brain you want to look into a little bit or ask a question?
Well, the first one that comes to mind is Mother Teresa. And when I was in the Marine Corps, I got to work with her for a little while. I was on her security detail, and being around her changed who I am as a person. Just being in her presence changed me as a person. And a couple of weeks ago, there was a book that came out about Mother Teresa that totally bagged on her and just ripped her apart, saying that she's a terrible human being. And I haven't read it yet because I'm afraid to. She's always been someone I've looked up to, but it's controversial when you come to the point of should we as a human being try to make the world a better place, or should we try to accept it for it as is? Which is a very Buddhist philosophy, but it's also what Mother Teresa lived by. Hers was about, if God gave you suffering, then you need to learn to embrace your suffering. And some people are saying, yeah, but you can also change that suffering, and we should work towards alleviating suffering. So I'd love to be able to have that philosophical conversation with her. And then Gandhi would be another one that'd be great to be a part of that conversation. Some of the other areas, though, that I find incredible, Neil deGrasse Tyson, I think, would be awesome to talk to about his perspective. Too. Yes.
He has a funny sense of humor.
He does, yeah. And he's able to really grasp concepts. I think some of the others, maybe Nelson Mandela, would be really interesting, because we talk about, when I mentioned I didn't find my calling until I was in my 40s. Well, Nelson, he spent his prime of his life, he spent in prison. So, and a lot of people would have just thought, wow, my life is over because I'm spending it in prison. And he didn't. He went on and still became an amazing human being. And then you have to talk to Stephen Hawking, who they said he was going to, he'd be lucky to make it to 30, I think. And he made it to 70. Which is amazing to think about that. This person that was locked inside his body, which makes me wonder, what is our brain? What are we capable of? And is there going to be a time when we will start harvesting cloned bodies? And then when you get old, they just move your brain and your consciousness into the new body. who knows where we'll end up in the future with that, but it's
Have you seen
intriguing.
Westworld? Westworld goes into that a little bit. I don't know.
Oh,
It's a freaky thing. Yeah. So if you could change one thing, well, I'm not going to ask it that way. Let's just say this. If you could teach the world just one thing, and the world needs to know actually many lessons, I think, right now. But if you could teach them one from Darryl, what would you want them to learn from you?
that we are all the same.
Mm.
And I think the same. I remember when I was a kid, and I remember a teacher or someone talking about snowflakes, and oh, they're beautiful snowflakes, and everyone is individual. And I thought, everyone is individual, just like every other one. So yes, we are individuals and we are unique, but we're also the same. And I think most of the problems we have in the world result in us versus them. And I read about was it Davos? No, Zuckerberg. He lost $16 billion last week
Oh, yeah.
because of the loss of the stock market.
Mm-hmm.
And to have $16 billion to lose, and that's not going to affect his lifestyle. It's not going to change him in any way whatsoever. And when I think about that kind of money, and I think, would he accumulate that kind of money if he realized what he was doing to the people that, the other people in the world? Like the guy who owns Amazon, for example. Would he really want to hoard billions of dollars for himself if he saw every person that works at an Amazon factory as a human being worthy of life and worthy of beautiful things in their lives and being able to travel and fulfillment and all of that? And if you start thinking about every individual being worthy of that and deserving it because they're just like me, and I am them are the same, and we are all one. And when you think about that, then you stop hoarding, and you stop trying to figure out, well, let's see, if I have 1 million people working for me and I can screw every one of them out of $1, that's an extra $1 million I have. And if I can do that every hour of every day for the rest of their lives, would you do that? I'd like to think that I wouldn't. But the only way that's going to happen is if for those people to start realizing that we're all one, we're all the same. And they are just as worthy of that money as the people who have it.
Mm. It reminds me of a beautiful meditation that I do in training, sometimes called Just Like Me, where we are reminded of our shared humanity. And I think when you were talking about the snowflakes, I'm going to steal that story, by the way, because yes, we are all individual, and I love that, but we are all alike. And I think we tend to focus, especially right now, on all the ways we're different rather than on any ways that we're the same. And so that's a profound lesson that you would teach.
And that's a normal part of our biology. I mean, when you look at someone from the caveman days and you look at a rustling in a bush, and you have to think, is that bush a bird playing around that might be food for me? Or is that bird or is it just the wind blowing that's rustling that? Or is it a mountain lion that's hiding in that bush who's going to jump out and eat me? And you have a split second to make that decision. When you're walking along and you meet a person, you have a split second to decide, friend or foe. Am I going to fight, flight, or freeze? How am I going to respond? So we naturally make those decisions. It takes a higher level of thinking and a higher level of mindfulness in order to get past that. And when I see and I look at extremely wealthy people who are hoarding, I feel sad for them because it shows that they're unevolved, and it shows that they are mentally very weak, childish people who, if they were capable of making better decisions, they would probably make some differences. And I think an example of that is what Bill Gates has done. I mean, I think Bill Gates was kind of a terrible person for a long time. And at some point he thought, maybe I should stop trying to make a lot of money and I should start making the world a better place. And he's really owned that. And it's kind of beautiful to see that. And I think that I'd love to be able to talk to him and hear about how did he come to that realization? And was it more of a meditative thing where he realized that I have the ability to make the world a better place, I should do that because I want that to be my legacy? Or is it more of somebody convinced him that he'd be more cool and more popular if he were to do that? I like to think it's because he's more involved. and that he's finally developed a conscience.
Well, and even if at the beginning it was to be cool, once you start giving, it feels good, right? And then that's a different realization, like, oh, this is kind of cool on its own, without
right.
being hip. Okay, so now's the time where you can ask me a question, and I will do my best to answer it.
So you're an educator. I'd like to ask you a question. I work with a lot of homeless people. So I work with the results of the failure of our education system. And I looked at that, and I look at, as a nonprofit, we measure outputs and we measure outcomes. And I think that schools tend to not do that. They tend to measure their outputs. What is your graduation rate? What is your attendance rate? What number of your kids go to college? That kind of stuff. And is it possible that maybe schools could change and maybe start thinking of, how about if we measure them by how many of my students have a full-time job after they've graduated? Or maybe they chose to go to college, or maybe they chose to go somewhere else. But how about an evaluation that really talks about outcomes? How did I impact this kid's life? Not how well did I teach him to take a test, but how well did I really change who he is as a person and made this child more successful?
Well, that is a big question, and it's one that I'm actually pretty passionate about. So I think that I was just talking with another person recently, and saying how, just if we look, this is going to sound way off target for a second, but bear with me. If we look at phones, okay, when I was growing up, we had dial phones. Then we got the push button phones. It was super exciting. Then we got cordless phones. It was like, oh my gosh, I can walk around the house. Whoa, this is cool. Then we got, car phones, and then we got giant cell phones, and then we have, our flip phones, and we have the cell phones we have today. So that was only in the last, 30 years, 40 years. I guess cordless phones, 40 years, right? And look at how much a phone has changed. Education has not changed in hundreds of years. We still put kids in rows. We still teach that, here's the information you must absorb and spit out. And I think we are missing a big piece of teaching kids how to, first of all, be curious and want to learn, and then teaching how to make it stick. I think we teach kids how to take good tests, and that often is different learning than learning that sticks. And so, and there is a move to shift to teaching kids social emotional learning. That's something I'm passionate about, but to me, it's still slow. It's there. I think a lot of districts will say, oh, we got to check that off the box. We're supposed to be doing that, teaching that SEL stuff. But I don't think there's a passion for realizing it's the foundation for all other learning. When you talked about our fight, flight, freeze, if I walk into a classroom and I'm not even sure I belong there, I don't know if the teacher likes me, I don't know if this kid next to me likes me, my amygdala has already gone off now. I'm in alert, trying to watch the room. I'm not learning. It doesn't matter what you're doing. And so I think if we start looking at, I love your idea of other ways to measure, because sometimes we get kids to graduate. We're super excited about our graduation rate. But yeah, then they get a job at McDonald's. They decide they don't love that job. And then what? What are we doing to help them transition into that adulthood? I think we are missing big pieces. And even kids that go to college, Yale had, you figure kids that go to Yale, they're brilliant and intelligent, or they've worked really hard and they've had opportunities. So they get accepted there. They're in their freshman year, and halfway through, over 50% of them end up seeking mental health assistance, because they weren't taught, they were so stressed out and not taught ways to improve their well-being. And so they just started a happiness course at Yale, and it's the most popular course they've ever had. Over 1/3 of all of the students at Yale were taking this course. It's crazy. Yeah. And so I think if we don't realize that, and corporations are realizing that, they're starting to think about their well-being of their employees. Education kind of thinking about that, But the more that we get that, then that passes on to the youth, and they start, coming up able to take care of their well-being, to be curious about their own learning, to develop critical thinking skills, and to advocate for themselves. Because I think a lot of times we just give them food, and I don't mean food literally. I mean the learning, right? Like, here's this math lesson, take it, okay, spit it out, rather than going, do you want to know how this works? Let's figure out how this works. It would be a different kind of learning. So I guess that's, I don't know if that answers your question. That was kind of like a long answer, but
a little bit.
Hopefully.
But I agree that there's some changes that probably need to be made. We as an agency, we get audited by a lot of our funders, and the state had this requirement that a job description had to include what education is necessary for that job. And I refused to do that. So they came in for the audit and they're like, well, you have to do this. And I said, that's not what it says. What the law says is that I have to have requirements for this position, and education is not one of the requirements. So I don't require any of my staff to have an education. They have to have the skills that are needed. Sometimes they need a license. So like if you're a therapist, you have to have a therapy license. And in order to get that, you have to have a master's degree and the experience and all the other stuff that goes with it. But for most of our positions, I want job skills. I want people that are totally capable of doing the work. And if they learn that in school, that's great. And if they learn that from experience or from watching YouTube videos or whatever they need. An example of that is my executive assistant, Tabitha. She had a baby yesterday, so she's out. She's so sweet. She's the sweetest. I just adore her. When I hired her, she didn't know anything about computers. And I was very nervous about that. And she said, well, I can figure it out. I was like, oh, you've got to. That's part of your job. And she watched a bunch of YouTube videos. And when it came time we needed to set up Outlook on several computers, she watched some YouTube videos. She figured out how to do it, and she set them up. And then when there was a problem on our website, she did some research on, went on the internet and found some solutions and went and fixed our website. I mean, having the skills and the ability to find the information is far more valuable than memorizing the information. But how do you measure that? It's tough.
It's tough, but see, I think that's going back to the education question. We're teaching kids knowledge, but the knowledge is really at the touch of their fingers, right? They could just Google. We Google everything. I Google everything, right? And so instead of teaching them knowledge, let's teach them skills.
When I think about high school, the only classes that I really remember in high school, I mean, a little bit about literature because I love reading, but I took a typing class, and that's amazing. It should be required for every student everywhere, should be required to take them. It amazes me how many therapists I have that come in who have a master's degree in marriage and family therapy and can't type. That just seems like a skill that you need. And then the other one was home ec. Home ec talked about how to balance a checkbook and how to create a shopping list to go grocery shopping. So you have the basic stuff like that really stood out. One of the classes that really stands out for me also is when I was in college, I took a bunch of classes on Pascal, which, have you even heard of Pascal?
I've heard of it, but I'm not familiar.
So
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to go back in my brain and see why.
Yes. Pascal was the computer language that was supposed to take over for DOS. And we were told that Pascal is the future, and in the future, to have a good job, you have to know Pascal because that would be required. And within 2 years, it was gone, and it's a dead language now. So it always reminds me of just like you said, knowledge is nice, but learning a love for reading is far more important than memorizing what Jane Austen wrote. Or how many short stories did Thoreau write? I mean, that kind of information. So what? But learning how to find that. I took an astronomy class, right, to memorize all the star charts. It was worthless. I don't remember any of it. But I do remember some of the information about how to find a star chart and where to go online to look up star chart for where you are and that kind of information. And that's what matters.
Well, and I think about, okay, even in the astronomy class, right? It could develop your curiosity to know about the stars, right? And to want to discover. And I think, I'm reading a book. I don't have it next to me right now, but right now I'm reading a book by Sir Ken Robinson on passion and finding your element. And he talks about how the fact that we need to spark kids' curiosity and passion, and that we only focus on one type of intelligence rather than thinking about all the ways that people show their intelligence, not just book smart. So I think and actually, I should recommend this book to you, because in the section that I was just reading, they were talking about people ending up homeless who really, it started when they became disengaged in high school, that they had a skill, whether it was playing the guitar or fixing a car or whatever it was, but that was not valued in high school. They became not valued and then disengaged and then dropped out. And so I would say we really need to develop a metric for engagement, and where we see those gaps, we need to attack that like it's the emergency room, and we are, emergency room doctors trying to, save those lives at that point before they end up with you.
We work with a lot of homeless kids, teenagers, and one of the we struggle with terms to use, and at risk is a popular one, but I don't like that term, and a lot of us in the field that are progressive don't like that term, and we've shifted to using disengaged youth. Mm-hmm. Because more often than not, that's what it is. I teach classes. I teach a class on cultural competency, and one of the things we talk about is finding your tribe. Humans naturally need a tribe to be in, and we find tribes, and we talk. And I always talk to the people in the class about, what tribe are you a part of? And of course, the immediate response is ethnicity and religion, and those are the two that pop up. And then we start talking about, well, what about other tribes, and what identifies a tribe? And I talk about my time in the Marine Corps and how you see, generally speaking, when you talk to someone who is in the Marine Corps, it doesn't take very many conversations to find out that they were a Marine. And when you are a Marine, most of the time you have a conversation and you spot it almost immediately, because we talk different. We communicate in a unique way. And that changes who we are as a person. And part of our finding our tribe is important. And so many of our kids, that's why I loved the emo movement with all the kids that are all into emo, because on the one hand, it's stupid and dumb, but it gives the kids who are disengaged a group, a tribe that they can engage with and be a part of and feel like they belong in some way. When I was a kid, it was the punk rockers, and I decided I wanted to be a punk rocker because I didn't feel connected to anyone else, and all you needed to do is dye your hair green or purple, and all of a sudden, boom, I'm a punk rocker now, yay! But they were very accepting and open, and their tribe was a very warm, friendly tribe. And I think more often when we get our kids engaged and they find a tribe, then they can help each other. And one of the reasons that most of the homelessness services I see in America are failing miserably is because they're still stuck in the old days, where you find a homeless person and you snatch them out of their community and you put them in another community where they have a place to live, and they should be grateful for that. And they're not grateful. They're angry. And the reason they're angry is because you just took everything away from them. You stripped them of their identity. You stripped them of their community, their tribe. They've lost everything. And basically you stole everything of value from them and gave them something that you thought was valuable, which was a place to live. So we try to be really careful with that and very mindful, and allow our clients create their own plan. They create their own case management plan. They create their own goals. We teach them how to create a goal and how to work towards a goal, but we don't create the goals. I don't set a goal that we're going to find X number of people are going to find jobs. We don't, that's not it. Our goal is for people to become engaged in their community, to develop permanency. And a lot of the psychological literature, when you work with at-risk youth and disengaged youth, it talks about permanency. Who is someone that is a permanent fixture in your life, who's a positive person in your life? Many of these kids don't have that. And when we talked about them in the beginning, they can't identify a single adult that they trust. And that's scary. And how are they ever going to be able to fit into what we determine as successful society if we can't let them feel like they're a part of our society.
It's interesting because I've been on just a soapbox about belonging and connection the last probably year and a half, and I see it here. I see it with kids, obviously. I've really been focusing on it lately in the workplace, where employees don't feel like they belong, and they're becoming disengaged. They go to work, they go through the motions, but they don't feel a sense of connection. And now hearing you just talk about with the homeless, like it's just a theme that I feel like we need to start everywhere at the level of belonging. I mean, it's Maslow: food, water, belonging.
Right.
Safety.
But most people will give up food and water for belonging.
Yeah.
I think Maslow got that one off a little bit because he didn't get the psychological factor of it. If we were animals, maybe. But how often do you see that with animals, where you hear the story about an animal got caught in a trap and the other animals that are part of that tribe stayed with that animal?
Oh, yeah.
So what tribes do you belong to?
What tribes do I belong to? The Thrive Tribe. I have several tribes. I think I have a sense of belonging with anybody who's passionate about education, not just saying I'm in education, but about educating. So I feel like the Thrive Tribe, even before that, I had other kind of social network areas where I connected with educators, and I love sharing ideas and stealing ideas and giving away ideas, and that's kind of when I'm in flow. I have a Thrive Tribe of some amazing women that I'm working on a book with, and I have a Thrive Tribe of family, all kinds of different little tribes. But that's great. I think we have to have those.
Okay. So when you're out driving, watch for motorcyclists and watch how they always wave to each other.
Oh, I know. They do that whole signal.
They all do that. And it's part of the tribe. It's just like acknowledging my tribesmen, the people that I connect with.
Yeah, I love that. I have noticed that going over Ortega Highway a lot to Dana Point. So thank you so much for being on the show today, Darryl. I've learned so much from you, and it's just been enlightening and fun. And I hope you've learned something too. And for the rest of you out there, I want to know your story. We all want to know your story. Everyone has a story. So please contact me and say that you'll share yours, or I'll hunt you down and I'll beg you, like I did with Darryl, to say, hey, be on the Thrive Tribe Saturday shout out. Other than that, have a great rest of your Saturday, and we'll see you soon. Bye. Peace.